A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed is nay. Thank you. Madam Clerk, first item on the agenda is a final read for finance. Let's go ahead and read this one, please.
An ordinance to amend ordinance number 13334, known as the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget ordinance, so as to appropriate $300,000 from the Department of General Government to the United Way of Greater Chattanooga.
All right, let's move on down to resolutions. 7A, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a license agreement with the state of Tennessee in substantially the form attached for a 10-year renewable license at no cost for permission to use and maintain a multi-use path underneath the Interstate 75 bridge over Chickamauga Creek.
Okay, B, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a license agreement with the state of Tennessee in substantially the form attached for a 10-year renewable license at no cost to use and maintain a multi-use path underneath the C.B. Robinson Bridge.
Good. C, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Economic and Community Development to apply and accept, if awarded, the Blue Cross Healthy Place Grant sponsored by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee Health Foundation for an amount not to exceed $7 million.
All right, seeing the lights. Let's move on down to D, please.
A resolution approving short-term vacation rental application number 18 STVR 00059 for property located at 643 Hamilton Avenue.
All right. Nothing at this time. We will be going over these tonight, just like planning items. E, please.
A resolution approving short-term vacation rental application number 18 STVR 00060 for property located at 720 Old Dallas Road.
F, please.
A resolution approving short-term vacation rental application number 18 STVR 00051 for property located at 225 BS Seminole Drive.
No questions there either. Next.
A resolution authorizing the chief of the Chattanooga Police Department to enter into an agreement with Converent Technologies for customer support and maintenance for pole cameras for a 5-year period from August 1, 2018 through July 31, 2023 for an amount not to exceed $128,748.
All right, see no questions on that one. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next on our agenda shows a departmental report, but we are not going to have that this afternoon. That has been rescheduled, so I'm going to scratch that off. However, I will say last week we had a presentation by the staff, the administration, with an update on the Avondale YFD Center and the current status of construction. There were a number of questions that were brought up, concerns from many people up here, concerns that were relayed from community members, and the staff came up and presented that case with a lot of answers. And at this time, I'm going to call on Councilman Byrd. I do believe he wanted to ask for another opportunity to ask a few questions, sir.
Thank you so much, Chair. This being a community in concerns of safety issues.
Hey, Councilman, sorry, hit your light. And then, okay, now your mic should be on.
Okay, testing. There you go. Okay, listening to the community, hearing about safety issues and different things that went on in the previous planning, I was just wanting to talk to the council, because after that meeting, I still received numerous phone calls and still received numerous emails from constituents and people who just love that area and just asking about safety for their kids. And I was asking if I could get 3 or 5 minutes for Ken Smith. He's the neighborhood association president. He wanted to just come and express some of the concerns, because I couldn't speak on all of them myself, and some of the issues that he had, and some of the things that I wanted to echo through him, if that was okay with the council, to allow him that time to step up and say a few things. And he brought some of the community members and leaders with him as well, not to speak, but just to be in support of him and the words that they wanted, just to let the council know of these are some of the things that are going on in the community, if you all would please allow that to happen.
I'm asking him a question. Mr. Smith, do you mind coming up real quick? Good afternoon.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. You were here last week, right?
Yes, I
Great.
was.
I would love to hear everything. Matter of fact, I'd love to hear from the entire community, as I have already, I think, to some degree. I have no problem with this myself if the council doesn't have an issue. The only thing that I'm going to apologize to ahead of time is this entire afternoon agenda only allows for 1 hour because our meeting starts at 4 o'clock. So if you would like a little more time to address the council, be happy to allow that to happen at another time. If you feel like you can get out everything you want to say, I don't want you to feel rushed. If you feel like you can get everything you need to say in that 3 to 5 minutes right now, sir, you are more than welcome to speak, being here and having the community here in support. I just don't want you to feel like we're cutting you off. We just have 1 hour to get through a really hefty meeting.
I understand that. I can give you the tip of the iceberg and maybe we reserve some time for another meeting. That'll be good.
Very well. Please, sir. Well, let me make sure. Is there anybody on the council that objects? Great. Please, sir, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and other council members. I am here. My name is Ken Smith. I'm the president of Avondale Neighborhood Association. I do have members of the community and supporters of the community here. For those of you from the Avondale supporting the idea for the center, if you would, please stand real quickly, just to recognize that they are here. Thank you. We've had some discussions about the new Avondale Center that's coming online, that's being constructed. Now, one of the things that you asked the Avondale community to do was to be patient. And we think we were patient. The old center was built somewhere in 1949, so we're coming up on 7 decades. 7 decades where we've endured a lot of administrations, a lot of city council members, and we're finally getting our gym, or the new recreation center. So when the mayor announced that we were getting a new center, we were all overjoyed. We were thrilled to finally see the day come where we were going to get a new center. And we were going to have, in some of the meetings, we talked about, the mayor asked us what we would like to see in the center, and we gave him a laundry list. We couldn't get them all, but we got most of it, some of it. Well, the one thing we did want to get was a gymnasium that was becoming and fitting for the young athletes that we have in our area. And what we're getting, and this all started from when we saw the concrete bleachers being built, it kind of sucked the joy out of the announcement, really, to be honest with you, because the phone started to ring, and there was a lot of concern, a lot of safety concerns, and a lot of issues that came up about having those concrete bleachers. So what we wanted to relay to you is that we're just not happy with that, what we have now. I was at the meetings for rendering ideas, for input in what we wanted to have. And some of the things we asked for, we may get, but that gymnasium was the size it is, it's not one of them. I looked at blueprints. I've talked to a lot of people, and on the blueprints, the gym is going to be 104 by 96. That's just the size of the gymnasium. The bleachers are going to be 46 feet long. That's half the gym. We're not getting a gymnasium, we're getting a bleachatorium. It's half the size of any gymnasium, I think, that's in other centers. I went to Hickson, I went to South Chattanooga, I went to Brainerd, I went to a lot of other gyms looking for bleachers and how they were constructed. None of them had concrete bleachers like you're proposing at the Avondale Center. We just find that that's kind of unacceptable idea to put those bleachers in there, especially when we're talking about kids running with the basketball, running at full speed and trying to come to a stop. There's only a 6-foot buffer between the floor and the concrete gymnasium. It's just kind of just a bad idea, just to put it bluntly. And most of the residents that I heard from said, They would rather not have the gymnasium than to have one of that size. So what we want to do, hopefully, is to get with you guys. We want to establish a better line of communication, number one. We want to establish, we have formed a committee so that we can work better with the project managers or who are site engineers, architects, who all is involved, work with the city council. We know you're just the appropriation body, but we want to get a better line of communication. So we want to start having meetings with our committee to try to prevent this from happening again, or see what we can do about this gymnasium. We also would like to look at alternatives for that concrete bleacher. Maybe you could redesign. We need something different than what's being proposed into that gymnasium. And if you could, it is not an issue of whether or not you want, to spend the money. I think what you should consider is the safety of the children that are going to be using that gym. The gym that we have, the existing gym, which was built a long time ago, that gymnasium was inadequate. This gymnasium is inadequate. And we had to wait 70 years to get a new one, and we haven't made an improvement. So I implore upon you to reconsider this design. It is not a good design. It can be fixed, and we would like to work with you in fixing it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And it's very apparent that Councilman Byrd has been bringing these issues up and having a lot of conversations and meetings, I know myself, and it's obvious that the community is very impassioned about this, so thank you very much. And I just have one question. Thank you. Maura, would you mind coming up real quick?
Yes,
I
Chairman.
know we're on super short order, so I'm just going to ask, is this something that we can possibly discuss next week and maybe just keep talking this through? We've just had a request for a better line of communication, see what we can possibly do between our body, between the administration and the community. Can we make that happen for next week?
Of course, yes, sir, we'd be happy to.
All right, we'd really appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank
thank you,
you.
sir.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
Councilman Byrd, did you have anything else?
I echo the community's concerns, and I hope that we will be able to create a better open line of communication and just make it safer for the kids, because at this point, as going through it is really not safe. And I do want to make sure that our kids are in a gymnasium where they can have fun and run freely without the essence of getting hurt in a very serious way. So I just echo everything that Ken Smith said in the entire community, and let you know that we will continue to fight for you and resolve this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. All right, at this time, that ends our regular agenda, which moves us, I guess, immediately into Public Works and Transportation. Chairman Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I get approval of minutes? All those in favor say aye. Okay, today we're going to start with transportation. Oh. Sorry about that. Mr. Bailey. Chop, chop. Would you please read ordinance's first reading 6A?
An ordinance closing and abandoning a portion of the 1200 block of East 28th Street as detailed on the attached map, subject to certain conditions.
See no lights. Councilman Byrd, you okay with this? Tap it. There you go.
Testing. There we go. I was going to, I asked that at the end of doing the 6 o'clock agenda session that we table this to further notice.
All right, so you're saying in the meeting you're going to make a motion to table?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please read 6B.
An ordinance amending Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 35, Article 7, pedal carriage and rickshaws, Division 1, Section 35-241, definitions.
All right, thank you very much. Going to resolutions on transportation, please read 7J.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Transportation to apply for and if awarded a Transportation Alternatives Program grant from the Tennessee Department of Transportation to conduct the Alton Park Riverwalk Connector with the city's portion not to exceed $200,000 for an amount not to exceed $1 million.
No questions? Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute, hold on. Councilman Henderson.
Blythe, does this go back to the abandoned railroad tracks? Is that the portion of
Yes, sir.
Riverwalk we're talking about here?
Yes, sir.
And this had been deferred from last year? Do I remember that correctly?
I don't recall that. I'm happy to research that.
I thought this had come up before, and there were some problems with it. I'm just trying to,
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to do some research on it.
okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Okay, now we'll do Public Works. Please read 7H.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to accept reimbursable funds for the recycling rebate from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation in the amount of $32,448.
See no lights. Please read I.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to execute a consent to assignment of all purchase orders for vendor number 855749 Greshman Smith and Partners to Greshman Smith relative to purchase order number 550357 for professional services on-call wastewater capital improvement projects.
Don't see any questions. Okay, great. All right, now we're going to move to next week, October 9th. Ordinance is on first reading. Please read 6K.
An ordinance amending Chattanooga City Code, Chapter 31, Sewer Mains and Drains, Article 8, Stormwater Management, Division 7 Fees, Section 31356.1.1, adjustment to quality fee related to water quality fee reductions.
Can we get an explanation on this?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is a ordinance amendment related to properties that use an environmental cap, but we're giving them a discount because they're not using it for their business, but it's actually to protect their environment. So we're just adding that in there.
And they'll get a water quality fee reduction for
A
using that
discount.
technique?
Yes. And it's monitored as well. So we go out and check the property and make sure they're not using it for their, whatever their business is.
Okay. No questions? All right. Probably going to be some questions on this next one. Please read 6L.
An ordinance amending Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 18, Garbage and Refuse.
Councilman Gilbert.
Tell me about it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, we have a presentation for you, if you'd like to see it. But the amendments are related to brush collection. We're trying to prevent us from picking up from contractors. So we have limit the size or the diameter of the trees that we're collecting, as well as the amount. And we're also going to monitor how often we go to a certain property.
I think Justin came to us and spoke about allowing grass cutters to cut brushes and put them out. You saying you limited now?
No, I'm just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about size and diameter of trees to make sure we're not picking up contractors, land clearing, and things like that.
So what about a regular resident that cuts logs? So you're gonna make it smaller? I think it's 6 foot now, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
So you're gonna make it smaller than that?
Yeah, that's just helping our collection crews and things like that.
How small we looking at cutting it before it's picking it up? Right.
Okay. Size is 8 feet.
8 feet.
8. Yeah. 18-inch in diameter, no more than 8 feet.
So let me ask you a question. Say you got 2 acres of land, you got 8 feet, 8 feet, 8 feet. Do you pick all of it up, or you have to, what will you do with that?
Yes, we'll pick that up.
You still pick it up?
Yes.
Just as long as it's 8 feet, 8 feet,
Yes.
separated. Okay.
Yes, as long as it fits within guidelines.
All right.
You okay?
Yeah.
Councilperson Burrs.
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if they have a presentation for us, and we're not going to see it this week, if we should postpone the first reading until we've seen the presentation?
The Councilwoman, the presentation is for the CBD. I do apologize.
I'm sorry?
There's an additional change in 18 for the Central Business District. That's what the presentation is for.
Oh, so you don't have one on this?
No, ma'am.
So could we have then, I guess, our time is short. I think I would like an explanation of what we have now, what we're going to, and why.
I would too.
So could we have that next week when there's time and defer this for 1 week? Is there any urgency?
No, there's no urgency on this.
All right, so first reading was supposed to be next week, and what I'm hearing is a suggestion that next week we would defer this for 1 week so we could get a presentation on it next week. Is that what you're asking
Oh,
for?
unless the council wants to vote the same day they get the presentation. I don't care. I just think usually we like to take more time. But if the council wants to get a presentation next week and vote on it next week, that's cool.
Yes. Councilman Smith.
Don, if you just make sure that we have the ability to have that presentation, and I would recommend that we leave it on the agenda as is, and if after the presentation we still have questions or not comfortable, we can move it back. Will that be fine?
All right, if that's a pleasure, that's the way we'll go. Thank you. All right, moving on. 6M, please.
An ordinance granting a franchise to Comcast of the South to construct, operate, and maintain a cable system in the city of Chattanooga, Tennessee for the purpose of providing cable services, setting forth conditions accompanying the grant of the franchise, providing for regulation and use of the system and the public right-of-way in conjunction with the city's right-of-way ordinance, if any, and prescribing penalties for the violations of the provisions herein.
Any questions on this item for the October 9th meeting? Seeing none, we'll move to resolutions for next week. That's 7E.
A resolution authorizing payment to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in accordance with Section X48A of the consent decree for sanitary sewer overflows incurred during the period of January 1, 2017 through December 31, 2017 in the amount of $6,300,000.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question. Is this like a penalty payment or
Yes.
that's what I'm assuming?
Yes, for overflows. Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. If there are no more questions or comments for Public Works and Transportation, we will adjourn into Planning and Zoning.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Zoning Committee. Mr. Schultz, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We are going to be efficient today, sir.
We're going to have to be.
Thank you. I have the minutes. They are approved. We will move right into ordinances on final reading. And item B, which will be on final reading, we will move on. Actually, if there's no questions on this item, we are going to move ahead. Very good. As anticipated, next week, Tuesday, October 9th, ordinances on first reading. Mr. Schultz, 6B.
Okay. This is case 2018-117. This is a request to rezone from C2 to C2 with conditions. The applicant is the city of Chattanooga. You can see on the screen, it's on Mountain Creek Road. Mountain Creek Road runs in the middle of the screen, and then just to the left, the box in the yellow is the property. That's Reed's Lake Road.
Very good. I expected Councilman Henderson's light, so.
Can't get this thing to move forward.
You have more, Mr. Schultz, on this?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll skip through it. It's currently zone C2, surrounded by R1. I'll move through these quickly. A little bit of history on this site. In 1970s, this is part of a PUD request in 1970. It's a very large PUD from Montclair Estates. In the middle of the screen is Mountain Creek Road, and the roads to the left and right cross-hatched is Reed's Lake Road, and the area in a red circle, that's the clubhouse. Again, this is a part of a PUD in 1970. 1977, RPA received a request to rezone the clubhouse from R1 to R4, and at the same time, remove the clubhouse from the PUD. That was in 1977. Fast forward to 1980, we have a request to rezone the clubhouse from R4 to C1 with proposed use of a restaurant and a bar. That was approved by council in 1980. Here's the resolution or the ordinance that approved that rezoning. The intent of the C1 zone back in 1977 and 81 was basically, it's a long definition, but I highlighted the stuff in green. It's the clustering and development of commercial developments along highways and major thoroughfares. That was the intent of the C1 zone. Here's some of the permitted uses in the C1 zone at that time. It was basically motels, hotels, billboards and signs, automobile service stations, banking establishments, and restaurants and other establishments, basically serving the highway tourist. In 2002, RPA, working with Public Works and Transportation Department, looked at the zoning code, and we realized that the C1 and the C6 zone were very similar to zones that we already have in the books, which is C2 and the C5. So the C1 and C6 zones were actually abandoned, removed from the zoning code. This is not moving forward, but it was abandoned or removed from the zoning regulations. And at that time in 2002, we rezoned properties that were currently zoned C1 and C6 to C2. If you had existing conditions on your property, those conditions carried over. That affected about 600 properties. You want to try to back? Yeah. So it affected about 600 properties. And then in 2018, we had a request for a PUD. Yeah, here it is. And one thing to keep in note that the state did not authorize conditional zoning in Chattanooga until 1984. So some of the properties did not have conditions on them. Here's the intent of the current C2 zone. Basically the same definition, but the difference here is the clustering and development of businesses, offices, and service facilities. The key here is offices and service facilities. My next slide, here's the C1 zone. The C1 zone at the time did not permit office uses and residential dwellings, including multifamily apartments. The C2 zone, comparing the two, the C2 zone had some uses that the C1 did not have, such as offices, dwellings, including multifamily apartments, retail sales and service establishments, hospitals, and many warehouses. The C2 zone also had some different uses that were allowed by the Board of Appeals, such as funeral homes, animal hospitals, adult-oriented establishments. So in 2018, we received a request to do a PUD on this property at 1001 Reed's Lake Road. I won't go into the PUD, but this is actually the overall site plan of the PUD that was received for this property. In the middle of the screen is Mountain Creek Road. That case was actually withdrawn at the Planning Commission, and then in April 2018, the City Council asked staff to basically rezone this property or come up with conditions on this property to rezone it to C2 with conditions of office use and any uses consistent with the former C1 zoning uses. Again, the C1 zone and C6 went away. At Planning Commission, there was opposition. The PC found that the request would set the precedent of the city rezoning a single property rather than being part of a much larger zoning study. We've done zoning or down zonings in neighborhoods before, but never really for one single property. So the Planning Commission felt that that would set the precedent. They also felt that this would set the precedent of retroactively imposing conditions on a single property some 16 years after the property was rezoned with no conditions. So the PC recommended to deny. Any questions on?
I do have Councilman Henderson.
Do you have the actual condition listed for us? In other words, the case number with conditions?
I do not. The case number is 2018-117. The conditions was in the ordinance adopted by the council, which was office use and similar uses of the C1 zone.
Okay. Can we make sure next week when this comes up that we actually list those uses?
We can.
In the conditions?
Yes, I'll be glad to put that in the
And
slide.
then, Mr. Chairman, if it, please the council, I've got, I think you're going to hear some questions next week about the legality of this ordinance in question. I've got a memorandum from an attorney who's done some study on some case law that actually supports the legality of this ordinance, if it's all right, if I'd like to hand these out so that this council could, you good with that?
I'm good. Sure.
So that you can read through this week and look at some of the case law that actually supports what we're trying to do here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Brian, I just have one quick question. Back in 2002, when city swept 600 cases, what was the notification process, if any? I think that's important to note.
Well, I wasn't here in 2002. I know what we do now. In 2015, we we notify the adjacent property owners of any zoning change. We put up yellow notification signs. Actually, the developer puts those up. That's not a requirement under state law. The only requirement under state law is to notify the planning commission hearing, the public hearing, and city council public hearing.
Okay, so we really don't know.
I think that's yet to be determined.
Okay.
I think that is one of the questions.
Have we looked?
We have looked. I have found the notifications with the city council. It was actually in 2003 when the city council heard the hearing to rezone these properties. We have not pulled the planning commission notification yet. Okay. Again, I'm not sure what 2002, I'm pretty sure it did not require notification to adjoining property owners, nor does it was changed in 2015 to require that now.
So in 2002, that wasn't our process.
We'd have to determine that. I think that's another.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. Did we not do something, or did we do something that was normal at that time?
It'd been normal at that time.
Normal at that time.
Yeah, you can see in 2015 when this was changed.
Okay.
Again, the yellow notification signs we put up are just as a courtesy. That's not required under state law.
Okay, that's what I was, because
And I think that is the crux of the issue that I don't know that sure that maybe Phil can answer that, or that's one of those things to be determined in the future.
Okay, so the notification process came in 2015?
Yes. Where we changed that to notify adjoining property owners.
Okay, very good. Thank you for answering that. Councilman Henderson, you had another comment. How are you now?
There we go.
How about that?
Are you saying, so it was state law that it had to be noticed in the newspaper?
State law requires any notification for rezonings to be advertised in the paper.
Are you saying you found that notification?
I did find a notification. Maria Manella sent that to me this afternoon. It was January 14th of 2003, was when the hearing was held at City Council.
So they noticed that in the newspaper?
Yes. I have the copy of the letter.
January 14th what?
January 14th, 2003. The following January 21st was when it was the second and third reading at City Council level.
Okay, so it wasn't rezoned to C2 until 23?
It went to Planning Commission in November, and I'm assuming the holidays, it was pushed back to January.
Okay.
So the first reading at City Council was on January 14th of 2003.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You good, Councilman? Councilwoman Burrs.
This is just a point of clarification for me. We cannot put, it's your position, we cannot put conditions on an existing zone, but we can remove conditions from an existing zone?
If applicant seeks to lift conditions, yes, we have taken cases like that.
So if a certain use is permitted in a zone, have we not in the past talked about lighting and garbage pickup and stuff like that?
Council
as
has.
Conditions?
They have. They put conditions on the hours of dumpster location, the usage, access, use of existing structure, signage limitations. The council has done that in the past on an active zoning case.
Okay, so it has to be an active zoning case.
I don't know that it has to be. That's how the council's always done it.
Well, I know that's how we've always done it. I'm not sure it's the right, but it's the way we've always done it. I guess my point is, if there is a legitimate C2 use now, do we ever put conditions on it?
You have. You talking about restricting the uses?
We've done that.
Yes, council has done that.
And we've also talked about lighting, if it's zoned for commercial use and it's a C2, we can put restrictions on it, right?
Correct.
Conditions. Is there any limit to the conditions we can put on it?
I think I would defer to Phil, but I think as long as it's legally enforceable and it's understandable by LDO what that condition says, it has to be some kind of nuisance. I think you're trying to protect. You're trying to protect the
your property.
protect the nuisance issue that this zoning could impact on adjoining property owners.
So we could technically put a bunch of conditions on something.
Council could. It's you're the
Thank
ultimate
you.
authority on the zoning.
Thank you.
We good, Councilwoman? Very good. I'm seeing no other lights on this item. So Brian, item C, and I believe before you begin and for time's sake, Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next week, I will be making a motion at the request of the applicant to withdraw.
Okay. City Attorney, Councilman, if you would just please read it into the record, and we will move on to item D after that.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 38, zoning ordinance so as to rezone property located at 4306 North Axis Road from RN residential zone to R1 residential zone to C2 convenience commercial zone.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Brian, D, please.
D, I can't get the pointer to move forward. This case, in the essence of time, do you want me to just hit the Planning Commission and staff had the same recommendation on this case, and that was to approve. This is in Hickson, request on the rezone from M3 and C2 to R4 for an assisted living facility. There was no opposition to Planning Commission, so staff recommended approve with no conditions, and Planning Commission recommended approve with no conditions.
Thank you, and I don't see Councilman Smith, and no other lights, so we will move forward. E, please.
This case has been deferred for quite some time. This is on Gun Barrel Road across from Erlanger East. It was a request to rezone from O1 to C2. Proposed use, it's a medical use now, but the applicant during the time requested to go C2 for an off-premise or billboard sign on the property. This was submitted to Planning Commission last November. The slide's not going forward, but at the November Planning Commission, let's keep going, a couple more slides. Just keep going. So at the Planning Commission, requested that the staff look at creating conditions to have in our pocket for zoning request on Gun Barrel Road. So we did that. Let's keep going. We had a bunch of conditions that staff drafted. Here we go. This is Gun Barrel, and you see the property in the red circle. That's the request. It's O1 now, but in this general location, this is just south of the target site. We've had several requests over the years to go from R1 and O1 and R4 to C2. The case on the left-hand side of the screen has the big arrow. That was denied. They wanted to go from O1 to C2 for a larger on-premise sign. City Council denied that request back then in 01. In 2014, the sign regulations limited the size in the 01 zone. So they wanted to go C2 for a bigger sign. That was denied at City Council. The other three properties that are shown with arrows going to those were approved at City Council with conditions. Next slide, please. This is the site plan that was submitted with the request. You can see it's the existing building. Gun barrel is just to your left. No changes to the proposed use. Next slide. Again, another copy of this site plan that was submitted with access off a gun barrel. These are some photos. The site is on the top left-hand side. The views on the bottom are the views across the street. You can see Erlanger East and the new medical office being constructed. This is in the Hamilton Place Community Plan. This plan, of course, it's old. It's more than 10 years old, but it recommends office for this general location and does not support the introduction of commercial zones at this location. As I stated a few minutes ago, in November, the Planning Commission asked the staff to come up with some conditions. So C2 zones may be rezoned in this general location from Igo Gap to just north of East Brainerd Road. And so those conditions that staff drafted and the Planning Commission were very supportive of those conditions on the right-hand side. Basically, those limited uses such as off-premise signs, drive-throughs, restaurants, liquor stores, any of those nuisance issues. Also, condition number 2 is to keep existing structure, keep existing entrance, ingress and egress from existing curb cuts only, lighting directed away from residential areas, no outdoor amplified speakers, and no dumpster service between 9 and 7 a.m. Next slide. Again, this request was rezoned to C2 strictly for an off-premise or a billboard sign, so staff recommended to deny. Next slide. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition. Planning Commission felt that this was consistent with the development of form along Gun Barrel Road, so Planning Commission recommended to approve with conditions, and these conditions are the same conditions that were in our policy that I just talked about. So the conditions were limiting the usage, no off-premise billboard signs, no drive-throughs, liquor stores, all those heavy noxious uses. Next slide. Keep existing entrance, lighting directed away from residential areas, no outdoor amplified speakers, and no dumpster service between 9 p.m. through 7 a.m. I think that's it on that case.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Brian. This one is in District 4. So this is a deferral from February of this year, and I have spent quite a bit of time researching this particular case, meeting with the applicant, also meeting with the city attorney, and I'm ready to move this forward and bring it out. Mr. Attorney, will you please read the new conditions? While the city attorney is bringing up the new conditions, I just wanted to point out what Brian had said, working off of an older plan for Gun Barrel, which has seen tremendous changes. And if there are any questions I can answer for you as a council right now, I'd be glad to entertain those while the city attorney is pulling up those new conditions. Basically, what I've done is clean up the conditions to limit the facility to the use that it is currently being used.
Okay.
And that way, it cleans up a lot of that.
That'll be the new revised
listing.
ordinance.
Yes, yeah, that'll be the new version. Simplifying it, what you can use it for instead of what you can't. So. If you'll go back a slide, I might be able to help out. Go to the conditions. There we go. Basically, the conditions are that remain in the new version will be the lighting directed away from all residences, the existing entrance and egress, and the number 1 condition now will be existing use only.
Much easier.
Much easier. So, thank you, Mr. Attorney. Glad to help out, brother. All right. If there are no other questions on this item, we will move forward.
Okay, go ahead and move the slide.
Item F.
This is 2018-178. There was no opposition on this, but I think I do need to address this case. It's 1813 Morris Hill Road, request to rezone from R1 to RTZ. Next slide, please. This is just a closer view of that property. It's across from Morris Hill Baptist Church, Petty Road. Here's a view of the property from Morris Hill looking at the site. Next, another view of this proposed subdivision that's actually under construction now. This is the current zoning. You have RTZ to the south, the R1 PUD to the north, and the little blue dashed line is the property we're talking about rezoning. It's a 1-foot strip by 210-foot long in length. Next slide, please. We've had several rezoning requests off Petty Road and Morris Hill. A lot of these have been to RTZ, R3MD, and R5 with a PUD. So this area has changed to a little bit heavier density development. Next slide. This is the site plan that was submitted with the property next door that's R1 PUD, and the green circle is the property that's asking to be rezoned. Again, it's 210 foot in length by 1 foot in width. This is the site plan at the property at the corner of Petty Road and Morris Hill Road. It's an existing RTZ zone. And just to the north of the red arrow that's a townhome. And the RTZ zone requires a 25-foot side setback, but that setback can be reduced when it abuts a RTZ zone, RT1, RZ1, R3, R3MD. So that is the reason for the request, is to rezone this 1-foot strip to reduce the setback. Staff felt that this proposal of a 1-foot strip to alleviate a setback is not the right appropriate zoning tool. It's more of a setback issue that would primarily go through the Board of Appeals instead of a zoning tool. If this zoning request was approved, it would set the precedent that rezoning is an appropriate method to seek a deviation from the zoning requirements rather than going through the Board of Appeals. Some other staff comments: the 25-foot setback is required by the zoning ordinance to create an appropriate transition between higher intensity development, such as townhomes and single family. And then rezoning a portion of adjacent property is, again, an inappropriate use of the zoning tool. If a hardship exists, the applicant should go through the Board of Appeals. So staff recommended to deny. Again, there was no, next slide, there was no opposition at Planning Commission. Planning Commission felt or determined that the request is an appropriate use of the zoning tool and recommended approval so the applicant can seek a decreased setback instead of going through the Board of Appeals.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. This is also in my district. This is a 1-foot piece of property. Especially noted to point out that the owner of the property adjacent to this has agreed and has no opposition. The reason this did not go to BOZA is a little interesting, and if Mike Price, is he here? Okay, we'll pick on him next week, but Mike made an error, I think, in calculations to meet his requirements for the property where the townhomes are going into. It needs the 1 foot in order to make the 18 that was on his plan.
Correct. That would he reduced the setback to 10 foot.
Although it's an unconventional use of the tool, we're going to have a little fun with it, I think, with Mike Price, and he'll pay for the 1 feet, 1 foot there. So does anyone have any questions for me on that? Very good. We're going to try and keep moving then. Brian, G, please.
G, this is a request to rezone from R1 to C2 for 1105 McDonald Road in East Brainerd. You see Gibbons Road and East Brainerd Road mixed. This is a transitioning area because East Brainerd Road has been widened. At this section, you still have residential uses. Next slide, please. This is a view of the site from East Brainerd Road. This is a view of the site across from the East Brainerd Road. Just some more pictures of that same site. It's currently zoned R1. You have R1 to the west and C2 and R2 across the street, R4 and R2 nearby. We've had several requests in this area. Right next door to this property, we've had a request to go from R1 to O1. That was approved with conditions. 2 parcels over, that was rezoned to C2 with conditions. And then across the street, across East Brainerd, we've had several rezoning requests there to go from R4 with conditions. This is the site plan that was submitted with the case. You can see the access to the property is off McDonald Drive and actually exiting onto East Brainerd. This is the East Brainerd corridor plan. Again, it's an older plan, but it recommends that this area remain office and keep your commercial to the nodes. So again, there's some uses in the C2 zone that would not be appropriate to the residential homes that are behind this property along McDonald Drive. The plan recommends office uses for this property, and approving this request would set the precedent for future requests, so staff recommended to deny. There was no opposition at Planning Commission. Planning Commission determined that the proposed use is compatible with the development form and recommended to approve with the following conditions: coffee house and office use only.
Thank you, Brian. This one, busy District 4 day. I just want to make a note that we did not, if you develop in District 4, you know how I love to have a community meeting to get input from everyone. This did not happen with this particular situation. So what I did ask the applicant to do was provide letters or notices of understanding. And I do have those. I have these to show for the record of all the neighbors in the surrounding area. No one has an issue with this particular use. I hate that it has to live in C2 with conditions. I wish it worked in C5, and maybe we'll address that in the near future, Brian.
Hopefully so.
Yep, because we have some work to do. Some special notes, too, that the applicant is willing to build a bus shelter for the children into the neighborhood, and he's also willing to incorporate a walk-up window and outdoor seating area. These are interests that came from conversation in the neighborhood due to the fact that this was a drive-through. This also is pending a TDOT review by a special committee. And so there are some conditions that may come down from TDOT and CDOT. So I decided to support this with the C2 with the conditions as listed. And if you have any questions, please let me know at this point. Seeing none, thank you, Brian.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, in essence of time, the next H, I, and J, basically the staff had the same recommendation as Planning Commission, was to approve. I can go through those if you want me to, but.
H.
This is request to rezone for 7628 Davidson Road for a bed and breakfast. You can see on the property here, you see Davidson Road at the middle of the screen. This is the property highlighted in the yellow. Next. This is just a view of the site's existing home, and a part of this home was already used as a bed and breakfast. Here's another view of the subject property. Again, you see it's already existing R4 in a portion of the home, but everything around this property is A1 as well as R1. Next slide, please. Again, we've had several requests in this area. We've had to the left or the west towards Gun Barrel, we've rezoned, or council's rezoned some of these R1s to A1s. Then this property again was rezoned A1 with a portion R4. Here's the site plan using the existing home. Next slide, please. Again, this whole property pretty much is in a floodplain. Staff comments, the proposal to expand the bed and breakfast to include the entire building is in keeping with the area plan, the residential rural character of the area, because the R4 special zone allows higher intense uses and residential densities conditions should be required. So staff recommended approve subject to the following conditions: no new construction for office or multifamily structures, bed and breakfast and single-family detached residential uses only. Next slide. Planning Commission recommended, there was no opposition. Planning Commission determined that the proposed use is compatible and recommended approve those same conditions. So there's no difference between staff and Planning Commission.
Thank you, Brian. And this is in District 4 as well. I have no issues with this particular item as well. If there are any questions, I'll entertain those now. If not, we are going to try to move on to I, please.
You want me to go through the whole presentation or just hit the highlights?
Highlights, please.
Yeah, this was a rezoning on Main Street, off of Main Street, Rossville Boulevard, to rezone from RA3 to UCX3 for mixed-use commercial development with residential. Staff reviewed this. There is no concerns. Staff and Planning Commission had the same recommendation to approve with no conditions.
Councilman Oglesby, do you have any issues with this one? No, none at all, Mr. Chair. Very good. If there are no lights, no questions, I will move on to J. We're going to try to do this.
177 is a request to rezone from from M1 to R2 for a duplex. It's currently surrounded by M1. It was used as a duplex a long time ago. Staff reviewed this. It is an appropriate use to rezone the M2 to put this use back into existence. You cannot have dwellings in the M1 zone. So staff reviewed it and recommended to approve. There was no opposition at Planning Commission. Planning Commission recommended to approve with no conditions.
Very good. Councilman Oglesby? Very good. Under resolutions, item 7C, this will conclude.
If you keep going. This is this is an interesting case. Keep going. This is a special exceptions permit for a PUD on Beeson Drive over in North Chattanooga. I think, yeah, here's the property. Again, it's not a rezoning request. This is a special exceptions permit for a PUD, for a residential PUD at 1000 block of Beeson Drive. Keep going. Here's a view of the site. You can see 27 just to the right, and this is the ridge highlighted where this proposed development would occur. Next slide. This is an aerial view of the same property. This is 27 to the left, going towards downtown. You can see this, the ridge cut, or the ridge. This is another view from Dayton Boulevard, 27, looking at the site. That tree line is where this proposed development would be developed at. Here's another view of that site, looking 27 towards downtown. The site's just in that wooded area. Here's a view of the site from Beeson Drive. The site's on the right-hand side. You can see Beeson Drive is very narrow with a large drainage ditch. Another view, just of some of what Beeson Drive looks like today. Again, it's zoned R2. This whole entire site is R2, so you can do duplexes in this property, but they're asking for a special permit for a PUD to do single family. There has been no zoning history for this site other than this case 2018-159, which will be heard tonight. That's the only case we've had in this general area to go to RTZ. This is the PUD plan that was submitted with the application. You can see it's maxed out with a density of 61 dwelling units over a density of 5.14. There is no plan for this area. Again, staff comments, you see the PUD plan on the right-hand side, and the left-hand side was the map showing what that would look like if this is developed. This also does show open space, but it doesn't show how the open space is being utilized. Is it parks? Is it going to be walking trails, benches? And some of these parks highlighted in blue, there's no connection from the roads or for pedestrian connection. So staff had a concern with that. Staff comments, this proposal does not encourage the preservation of the ridge line or steep slopes because it did not cluster the development. The PUD plan does not indicate how the open spaces are to be incorporated into the project. So staff recommended to deny. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition, and Planning Commission recommended to approve with no conditions.
Very good. Councilman Henderson.
Brian, this, as you pointed out, this is sort of one of those classic steep slopes construction developments, and I've Bridger and myself and the developer have tried to get together over the past week or 2 weeks, and we've not been able to make our schedules. I've got a lot of concerns about this development because of how many units would they be able to develop under just the R2? Do you know?
I think on the slide I had 52, based on a general number, 52 single family. And correct me, I think I misspoke. There was opposition at Planning Commission.
Yeah, there is opposition, and I've been hearing from opposition as well.
I think based on my calculations, you can do about 55 lots, but I took 3 of those lots out for detention and left it at 52.
And they're proposing how many?
61.
61. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Very good. I'm seeing no other lights on this item. If not, I will adjourn us, if there's no other business, into our regular council meeting, which will begin now.